Okay, so I think we'll make a start. I'm aware there are still people joining the webinar, but we'll start with a welcome and introduction. So, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar from the RC Psych on entering ST4 training in psychiatry. So my name's Declan Hyland, and I'm the RC Psych's Associate Dean for Choose Psychiatry. I'm also a consultant general adult psychiatrist in Runcorn, Merseycare NHS Foundation Trust, and I'll be chairing the webinar this evening. So thank you for joining us this evening. I appreciate that it is after 5 o'clock, but we are hoping to pack as much information as we can into this webinar over the next hour. So just a few housekeeping rules. If there are questions, we do have a Q&A function within the webinar, so do put your questions via the Q&A function. If you put them in the chat inbox, we may miss them. So we will keep an eye on the chat inbox, but try and remember to put any questions in the Q&A box for us to be able to answer them. And we're very fortunate that we do have a couple of people from the National Recruitment Team, Louise and Amelia O'Donnell, who will try and answer as many of the questions as they can that get put into the Q&A box. I can't guarantee we'll get through absolutely all the questions, but we will answer as many as we can. If we are not able to answer all the questions before the end of the webinar, there is no guarantee that they'll be able to answer the questions subsequently, but they will try their best to answer as many as they can within the next hour. So the only other thing to say then is just that we've got a couple of different speakers over the course of the next hour, and hopefully this will allow you as delegates to get a bit of an understanding about the actual process involved in higher training, the actual recruitment process itself. So we've got Louise Birrell, who's our National Recruitment Manager, who's going to speak about the recruitment process for higher training. And then we've also got Dr. Laura Middleton, who's a current higher trainee in forensic psychiatry. So Laura's an ST4 in the Mersey region. She's going to talk a little bit about higher training and how to increase your chances of being successful with your application for higher training. And then Jonathan May, who's our Vice Chair of the Psychiatric Trainees Committee as well, is also going to do a short presentation on the PTC. We will then have about 15 to 20 minutes dedicated for Q&A, so it's your opportunity to ask any questions that you want to ask. So without further ado, and to make sure that we keep to time, I'm going to now hand over to Louise Birrell, who's the National Recruitment Manager, and she's going to speak to us for around about 15 minutes on the higher training recruitment process. So Louise, over to yourself, if you've got any slides to share.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I will just share those now. Can you see those okay?
Yes, we can see them in slideshow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my name's Louise. I'm the ST4 National Recruitment Manager for NHS England. And I'm just going to do a quick presentation on a sort of walkthrough of the application process and the recruitment process for ST4 psychiatry. Okay, so for 2025 recruitment, the recruitment process is exactly the same as the process used for the intakes for February 25 and August 24 recruitment. So the process is based on the previous face-to-face format that we used before the COVID-19 pandemic started. So it's made up of three different elements. There is your verified self-assessment score, the online interview, and your adjusted CASP score. And each of those elements will count for a different percentage and are weighted in different ways. And I'll cover a little bit more information about those later on in the presentation. So the application process for ST4, there is one single application form. So it's under general psychiatry in the Oriel system. So you apply to that regardless of which specialty you're interested in working in for psychiatry. At the start of the process, you just submit a generic application. And then later on, when preferences become available, you'll be given the option to preference any of the subspecialties, including dual specialties, which have got posts available in them, and any of the regions across England, Scotland, and Wales as well. So it does give candidates a bit more flexibility and allows them to preference any and every sort of specialty that they want to in psychiatry as well. So that's the way you would apply in the system. So you just submit one general application to general psychiatry within Oriel. So there's usually more posts and applicants for ST4 psychiatry, but there are certain specialties and locations that are more competitive than others. So it may be that if you just preference a few certain posts within London, within certain specialties, that unless you rank very high, you may not be successful. Having said that, there are usually posts left at the end of the process. So if you are willing to work in many regions or many posts, if you're appointable, then you pretty much would be guaranteed a post. Anticipated post numbers are available on our website at the moment. So regions have submitted a minimum and a maximum range to us at the moment. Final post numbers aren't confirmed by regions until preferencing opens, which will be in about March time next year. So at the moment, the numbers on our website are just a guide, just to give you an idea of what posts may be available and in what regions as well. So the application form, it'll just ask for a few eligibility requirements in it. So all applicants need to be eligible for full GMC registration with a current license to practice by the start date of the post, which would be August 2025. You also need to hold full MRC psych by the post offer date, which will be mid-March 2025, and you also need to have evidence of achievement of core psychiatry competencies as well. And so for MRC Psych, it is possible to apply without having full MRC Psych at the moment. So the offer date for this recruitment round is March 2025, so we would need you to have full MRC Psych by that time. So as long as you have confirmation that you have a place in the CASC diet that takes place in January 2025, then you can still fill in an application form at the moment. Once you get your results in February, we'd then be able to use those results to combine them to get your total score ready for offers in March. If you haven't got a place secured in the January 25 CASC and you don't have full CASC at the moment, then you wouldn't be eligible to apply in this recruitment round. So your CASC scores will be adjusted at the end of the process, and they make up 50% of your overall applicant score. Core competencies, this is the main thing you'll need to demonstrate in your application form. So there's 3 ways of demonstrating core competencies. If you're currently in CT3 training post at the moment, then you just need to provide us with your NTN number in your application form, and then we can just do a quick check on that. You would then need to, on completion of CT3 training before the start date of your ST4 post, provide your employer as part of their pre-employment checks with confirmation that you'd achieved all CT3 competencies by that stage. If you've already completed CT3 training and you've taken a bit of time out of training, you would just need to provide us with your final CT3 ARCP. If you were released from training with competencies outstanding, then we'd also need evidence that they've been achieved as well. So, for example, if you were released from training with CASC still outstanding, we'd just need evidence in your application form that you've either achieved CASC so far or that you have a place in the January 25 diet. If you were released from training with other competencies outstanding, such as your psychotherapy competencies or audit competencies, we would just need evidence that those have been achieved since you have been working out of training. And then for those candidates who haven't completed a UK core psychiatry training programme, you can provide evidence of your core competencies by completing a Certificate C document. So the Certificate C document lists the necessary core competencies required for progression to ST4 as defined in the core psychiatry training curriculum. So for the August 25 intake, you can only use the August 2023 version of the Certificate C. So we can no longer accept any versions of the form before this one, as the form was updated in 2023 to reflect the newly introduced curriculum. The certificate is available on our website to download, and there's also links in Oriel when you're completing your application form that will take you to our website where you can download a copy of the form to complete there. So all applications must be submitted via Oriel. We can't accept any applications or any CVs via email. Everything must be done via the online system. The application window is open at the moment. It opened on the 14th of November, and it will close on the 5th of December at 4 o'clock. If you could aim to submit your application forms before the closing date, we can't accept any late or incomplete application forms after the closing time, and the system does tend to get quite busy towards the last few days of the application window because it's the same deadline for all higher training specialties. So there is quite a lot of traffic on the system. So if possible, we'd advise you to try and submit your application as soon as possible. The application form, it's quite basic really. It just asks for personal information, your qualification and employment details, MRC psych status, referee details, and finally the self-assessment scores. There aren't any white space box questions in the application form. And then depending on certain answers you give to certain questions, you may be prompted to upload a few different forms, which I'll go through on another slide to support your application. Initially, your application will be longlisted just to check that you meet the relevant entry criteria. There's no shortlisting for ST4 psychiatry. So once it's been longlisted, you'll be progressed through to the interview stage. During the longlisting process, we may contact you if there's any information missing on your application form, and we'll give you a deadline to submit that information to us. All comms will be sent via Oriel, so we do advise you to keep an eye on your Oriel account for any comms during the application and longlisting window. And then at the end of the longlisting process, which is likely to be very early on in January, we will invite all eligible applicants to book an interview slot online. So we'll provide more information to all applicants who are eligible at that stage in the process. I mentioned a moment ago about forms that you may be asked to upload as part of your application. So if you indicate in your application that you would like reasonable adjustments for the online interview section of the process, you'll just need to upload any supporting evidence to that with your application. If you tick yes to the reasonable adjustment section, the form will automatically prompt you to upload your evidence. And then special circumstances, there's a section in the form that asks if you would like to apply for special circumstances. So these can only be granted if you are the primary carer for someone who's disabled, or if you have a medical condition or disability for which you require ongoing care within a specific location. So the special circumstances is handled by a central team within NHS England. It's not run by ourselves. So what will happen is if you tick that you wish to apply for special circumstances in the form, the application will then prompt you to fill in the form, and it will give you the email address to submit the form to. The form must be received before the closing date of applications, so you can't submit the form after the application window is closed. And then you possibly, depending on your answers, may be asked to upload a reapplication to specialty form. So if you've ever started a higher psychiatry training program and you decided to resign from it, or you were released from it, you would just need to submit a form with the support of your previous deanery to support your application to a new ST4 psychiatry training program. And likewise, if you are applying to the same specialty but within a different region, so you want to transfer your training to a different region, you would just need to upload the reapplication to specialty in a different region form as well. Fitness to practice declaration, if you answer yes to any of those questions in the form, again, the system will prompt you to fill in a fitness to practice form, and it will provide you with the confidential email address to send that to. Again, those forms have to be received by the closing date of applications, which is the 5th of December. And then finally, the application form. If you're not currently in a core psychiatry training post and you haven't provided an NTN, it will prompt you to attach your evidence of core competencies. That will either be your previous ARCP form or your Certificate C form. Okay, so there is a little bit of information in the application form that we collect and pass on. So if you indicate in your application form that you would like a deferral, or you indicate in your application form that you wish to work less than full time, we will send that information across to the regions that you accept a post in, so that they can start processing either your deferral request or your less than full time training request as well. Accreditation of transferable competencies, that will be passed on as well if you wish to apply for that. And then finally, if you require a visa or a certificate of sponsorship to work, to take up a training post, we have a central, NHS England has a central team which processes all certificate sponsorship requests and processes all that immigration for us. So we will pass your information to them so that they can make contact with you ASAP to start the process of applying for your visa. And so I mentioned earlier that I'd just go through the different processes of the recruitment, the full recruitment process, and the weightings of those processes as well. So it's made up of three areas. There's your verified self-assessment score, your online interview, and then your CASC score. So the verified self-assessment score, once you have uploaded your evidence, it's scored by consultants, and then you will receive your verified score, and that's scaled down to make up an overall percentage is 17.5% of your total score. Your online interview will count for 32.5% of your total score, and then finally your CASC score, which will be adjusted so that they are comparable between different diets, that will make up 50% of your total score as well. The only element within that process which has a appointability threshold are the interviews. So the interviews are scored out of 50, and to be found appointable, you have to score 25 out of 50 to be deemed appointable in the interview process. If you are not found appointable in the interviews, then you will be rejected from the process after the interview stage. So you won't receive your adjusted CASC score or your verified self-assessment score because those elements take place after the interview scores are released. In the application form, there is the self-assessment domains listed, and they will ask you to score yourself in each of those 10 domains. So you'll be given different scoring criteria and different guide in the application form, and you will just give yourself a score as part of the application process. There's 10 domains in the self-assessment, and they are listed there. I won't go through each one now, but on our website, there is a whole section dedicated to the self-assessment process, and it lists all 10 domains, and each one is broken down, and it lists evidence that can be used under each score for each domain, and then what evidence counts for what score as well. So it's worth giving that information on our website, quite a comprehensive read before you submit the scores in your application form. So the scores you award yourself will then be verified by a clinical assessor. So please make sure you score yourself accurately at the time of application, and then we've just provided the link there, which is the full breakdown of the self-assessment scores and criteria and evidence of examples of evidence that you can use, which is on our website. All these links can be found in Oriel as well. So when you do start the application form, there's links in Oriel to the pages of our website to help you with your application as well. So any links that I've mentioned here that are to our website can be found in Oriel as part of the application. So at the time you apply, you'll just score yourself for each domain, and then there'll be an upload window, which is at the beginning of February. So it's between Monday the 10th of February and Friday the 21st of February. And at that time, we will send you a link to an online system, and we'll ask you to upload all your evidence to support your self-assessment scores in that portal, and that's what the assessors will use to verify your self-assessment scores then. So please make it as easy as possible for assessors to interpret your evidence. On the website in each domain, there are limits to how much evidence you can upload for each domain. So if it says, just as an example, that the limit is 2 pieces of evidence for a certain domain, if you upload more than that, the assessors are advised that once they get to the second piece of evidence, not to score anything after that. So there's no point in uploading more evidence than the guidance states. So just as an example there that we've given, if you're the first author in a 10 peer-reviewed publication as a postgraduate, just pick the 2 that you're most proud of and upload the evidence for them. Full marks are awarded for more than 1 first author postgraduate peer-reviewed publication, so we don't need to see any more than 2. So that's just an example there of where you don't need to upload more than what the domains are asking for. So just move on to the online interviews now. So the online interviews, you'll receive an invitation to interview at the beginning of January if you've been successfully longlisted, and within that invitation we'll provide links to a full guide of what to expect as part of the interview process. It's a 15-minute interview, and it's held online, and it's via a recruitment system called Cubicon Recruit, which is a bespoke system for online interviews. There'll be 2 assessors in your interview and potentially a lay representative. So we have lay representatives moving around the panels all day. So it may be that you have one of those in your panel with you. The interview will involve 2 6-minute scenarios. The STEM questions to both scenarios will be published in advance, and we will again contact you via oral to let you know when these have been published. You will only get the STEM questions, you don't get the full questions. So please don't prepare a full 6-minute answer based on those STEM questions that you get, because you will receive follow-up questions during your interview as well. There's also a score awarded for communication in the interview as part of the process, and assessors are briefed to bear in mind that body language is harder to read on a virtual interview, particularly for technical issues. So please don't worry if there are, the assessors are trained to take that into account. So the online interview has been designed to allow you to demonstrate your knowledge of core skills and attributes relevant to ST4 psychiatry. It provides a standardised interview process for all applicants, regardless of which ST4 psychiatry specialty you wish to be considered for. And it is a generic interview, but the questions are designed so that when you give examples, you can give specialty-specific examples if you wish to do so within those. And then the final part of your score will be made up of your adjusted CASC score. So CASC exam scores are adjusted so that we can compare them between diets and between specific days within diets as well. So what we will do is we will use the pass mark, the day pass mark from your CASC result, and also your CASC mark to calculate your adjusted score. So just as an example there, if the pass mark on the day you took CASC was 62.2% and you scored 62.2%, your adjusted CASC score would be 50%. And then for anything above the 62.2%, the adjusted CASC score would rise above 50%. If you have your CASC score at the time of application, the application form will prompt you to upload that as part of your application form so that we can verify those for those candidates that are sitting CASC in January. When you receive your results in February, we'll contact you at that stage in the process to ask you to provide us with your evidence then. So you'll have the opportunity to rank all available training posts in order of preference in March 2025. So the posts on our website at the moment, as I mentioned earlier, are just indicative. By early March, we ask all the regions to provide us with their final post locations and final post numbers, and we upload those into Oriel. And then in the middle of March, we will ask you to log into Oriel and rank all the preferences that you wish to be considered for. We do recommend you only preference posts that you realistically would be willing to accept. So sometimes candidates will preference posts, and then when they receive an offer in it, they contact us to say, "Oh, I didn't really want to work there," but they have disadvantaged themselves in the process really by doing that, because we can rescind the offer and put them back in the pot. But places that they may have wanted to work in may have already been offered out at that stage of the process. So we do recommend that you only do preference posts that you would realistically be willing to accept. Initial offers will be made late March, early April, and then when we make initial offers, you'll have 48 hours to respond to your offer. So you don't have to accept your offer straight away, you can hold it, but you just have to action it within 48 hours so the system knows that you're either thinking about it or you've accepted it. If you don't action it within 48 hours, the system will reject your offer. So after initial offers are made, we then recycle them every 48 hours in the system. So we try every 48 hours to see if there's any more posts that become available, because candidates may have rejected some offers. When we have made the first offers, and then subsequently when we make any other offers, we will reopen preferences in between that. So for each 48-hour period in between offers going out, preferences are open. So if you decide after initial offers going out that you want to add more preferences in, you want to consider more specialties or more areas, you have the option to do that. Or if you want to change the order of your preferences, so just as an example, if you receive your third preference offer, but you decide, actually, I'd quite like to keep this, I don't want the system to try and upgrade me to my first preference, you can go in and change your preference, your third preference to your first then, so the system will know that you're actually happy with that offer and you want to keep it. Once it gets to the offers process at the end of the recruitment round, we have a document that provides candidates with comprehensive instructions of what the offers process involves and what they need to do and what actions they can take. So please don't worry about that part of the process at the moment. We will be able to provide you with full guidance when we get to that stage. If you do decide to reject an offer that you've been made in this recruitment round, it has no bearing on any future application you may decide to make. Each of the recruitment rounds are individual, and we don't look back at any previous round when we are processing applications in another round. If you do want to defer your start date, you can only do so on statutory grounds, so such as maternity, paternity, or sickness, just as some examples there. So the final slide is just some key dates. As I mentioned, the application window is open at the moment. It will close on the 5th of December. The self-assessment evidence window will be the 10th of February to the 21st. So that's just after interviews. The interview window is the week commencing the 3rd of February and the week commencing the 10th of February. So we'll be holding probably about 7 days of interviews across those. So imagine it'd be 3 days in the first and 4 days in the second week. And the preferencing window will be mid-March, and then we aim to release offers in early April with the anticipated start date of the 6th of August next year. So that's the end of the presentation. I'll help my colleague Amelia answer some Q&A questions in the background, and then I'll be online to answer some questions at the end as well. So I'll hand back to Declan now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise. That was a real whistle-stop tour there, a lot of information. And I should have said at the beginning that the webinar is being recorded, so you can watch it back at any point in the future. Do keep your questions coming in, and Louise and Amelia will try and answer as many of them as possible. I know some people have struggled to access the Q&A function. Hopefully they've been able to resolve that issue. But if you put your questions in the chat box, it's likely that they may get missed. So do use the Q&A function. Right, okay, so I'm conscious we're running slightly behind schedule, so I'm going to introduce our next speaker, who is Laura Middleton, who I know very well, who's a current hire trainee in the Mersey region. She's going to talk a little bit about entering ST4, how you can improve your chances of a successful application. Thank you very much, Laura. Over to you.
Sorry, can I just check firstly, can you see and hear
so
me okay?
We can see and hear you okay. You're not in slideshow mode at the moment, so you just need to put it in slideshow mode.
I think it's gone onto the other screen. Has that worked, or is that still showing the...
Yeah, oh, there we go. Perfect. We're in slideshow mode. Thank you, Laura.
Is that working? Okay, sorry about
that.
Yeah, so my name's Laura Middleton. I'm an ST5 in forensic psychiatry, working up in Mersey. So going to be talking a bit about my experience of the application itself and some tips that I was told and some things I picked up along the way. So I think an important part of it is just preparation. So deciding exactly what program and things obviously you want to apply for. Speaking to STs about how they find the program. So that's the day-to-day, particularly around the on-calls, which could vary between the programs as well, and teaching. I think if possible, it's good to start as early as possible, looking at the guidance. I've put the links up here, and I know they were in the previous talk, but you could just Google things as well to look for the eligibility criteria. If you're already in core training, it's likely that you'll meet most of these, but if you're not coming from outside of core training, it's worth looking. Make a note of all the recruitment type timelines. I saved a load of my phone, set reminders. I know that you think you'll have lots of time, but things can come up sometimes, can't they? And so just making sure that you're not going to be caught out in that respect. I think the biggest tip that I found useful was about looking at the self-assessment criteria as early as possible. Seeing whether maybe you've already maximized the amount of points you're going to be able to get in one domain, or the most that you can feasibly get, then actually is it worth looking at some other areas? So there were things that I wouldn't necessarily have thought to do, but I realized that I could pick up points in other domains. And that's not saying stop doing the things that you're already doing, but it's worth having an idea of things that might be simply done that can score you points, because these are fixed points that you can get yourself. A CASC and interview are obviously a bit dependent on the day, but you do have a bit of time to help with that. Have a look at the evidence you need as well. So you might think you've got some evidence, but there's some of them they will accept any specific evidence. And it can take a bit of time to put together. So whether that's digging out old certificates from old computers or folders, but there are some things, for example, asked for a letter from a supervisor that I've been involved in a project. And these can take a bit of time because you're asking your supervisor to do it. I think one ended up taking me a couple of months. But just making sure that you've got everything ready so that when the window comes, that you can just put it all in and make it as unstressful as possible. As you'd expect during the application, so just giving yourself time to do it. There might be things that come up during the actual oral application that you needed evidence for or certificate for that you hadn't realised. So just give yourself time. And when it comes to self-assessment, so being aware that the evidence portal, at least when I did it, was different to the oral portal. So you're not uploading in that, you get a link separately somewhere else, and making sure you're uploading your evidence in the right place. It seems silly, but obviously just making sure that you're double checking because you've got quite a lot of things going through your mind. You've got a lot of evidence floating around the computer at that point. So just making sure that you've put everything in the right place and put everything that matches up and is going to score you the maximum points. A note for an interview. So just preparing as much as you can for things that are expected to come up. So there'll be similar sorts of topics that will come up in a lot of interviews. I know it was mentioned from Louise that the STEM questions do go up on the HEU website. I think the February STEMs are up there at the minute. And just having a think about what you think some of the follow-ons might be. And it could be useful to discuss this with your supervisor, and particularly if you can STs who have done it recently. I would say it's useful to practice answering out loud. So if you can practice with someone, but even if you're writing things down yourself and you've got an idea of what you think you'd like to say, it is quite different actually saying things out loud, putting it all together, and then seeing how your kind of mind puts all your thoughts together when you're actually under pressure. I would say try to avoid scripted answers, particularly because they might ask a question slightly differently than you're expecting. And it just comes across, I know where they're talking about communication scores there, a bit more natural. The next point is particularly for me, I think I had to concentrate on it quite a bit, which is just having a moment before answering. So rather, you don't necessarily need to jump into a response. If you can, some people film themselves, don't they, and then watch it back, which can be nerve-wracking at the time, but actually you can see what can seem like a long time isn't. So if you need a minute to gather your thoughts, that's fine. If you have an answer ready, then that's fine as well. And it's 15 minutes, it will honestly fly past. So just try and stay calm and take your time. Just, I suppose, a quick point about ranking. So it is just rank the jobs you want. So when I did it as well, it's one application, you can rank all the jobs. And whether that's that you want to do one specialty, you don't mind where it is, you only want to do one thing in one place, or whether you would like to stay in an area and have a bit more flexibility between your programs. I don't think it necessarily works if trying to play any sort of game with it. Just rank the jobs that you want to have. And I would say that post availability can change. So when I was doing it, even during the ranking window, new jobs did come in. So it might be that there's not as many jobs as you were hoping for once the window opens, or that there's none. But actually, I found that some did appear. So just keep an eye on it. You obviously do get emails and reminders that that's happening. And then I suppose just wanted to mention a bit about being an ST4. So say you've got through all the process and things that I found useful or would have been useful to think about really early doors. I'd say have a look at the portfolio. So particularly if you've come from core training, you might know those learning objectives like the back of your hand, but actually it's different. They change, there's new learning objectives. So just have a little look at the sorts of things that you need to be thinking about early doors. You'll get special interest sessions. So this is your time in the week. I'd recommend discussing it early with your supervisor because once you get started in the post, days and weeks and a couple of months can go past and you might not use them. So just make sure that you're having a think about what's going to be a useful way to use these. And similarly for study leave as well. So being proactive, trying to look what's going to be useful. One of the things I found about moving to ST4, I came straight from CT3, is that it is a different job role. So the responsibilities and requirements of the ST are different to the CT. And it's okay to delegate and learning how to delegate and passing some tasks to the ST if they're perhaps not necessarily what you need to be focused on. And that's a really useful thing. So also you could start thinking about what's next. I know you've just got into ST4 at this point. You're not going to be applying for your consultant jobs, but actually that's the step after this. So as you're going through your posts, are there things that you'd want to do? Do you want to be a consultant? Are there alternative career paths? Because I think sometimes when you're a registrar, it's a bit more like what the job will be like than particularly some of the core training posts. It's worth a note to say that on-call out-of-hours work is different from core training to specialty training. You might find that you're doing more mental health act assessments, giving advice on the phone, rather than being ward-based, which more as an SHO. You might have step downs for rota gaps, but it is quite different. And you'll be often working as a team. So if you're going out to do assessments, it's quite different to being one person, maybe covering a few hospitals. I personally much prefer it. It's very different. It's much more feeling kind of what I thought psychiatry was going to be. And that's just part of it. And that's part of enjoying it. But being aware that you might be out and traveling around a bit more. So making sure that you're looking after yourself. And that leads on to the last point of remembering that help's available. So you've now transitioned to ST, but there's still lots of people around you. Obviously, help's there. Making sure you're looking after yourself and enjoying yourself, because as I said, your role has changed, but hopefully for the better. So just to summarize there, a few points. So preparing, making the application process as smooth as possible. It's not too tedious, it's not too complex. If you can, have a look at the criteria early for the self-assessment in the interview. If you haven't, it doesn't hugely matter, but if you've got the time, it might be able to target some of your activities into the scores. I'd say it can feel intimidating. It is a step up from a few years, perhaps of core training or doing something else, but this is what you've been working towards, whatever you've been doing up to this point. You're going to be now working in a specialty that you've chosen to work in, rather than kind of rotating around a bit more. There's lots of help available. Hopefully you really enjoy yourself, and it's just to say good luck really with the process.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Laura. Some words of wisdom there from someone who's gone through it previously and come out the other side. So we're going to move swiftly on to our next speaker, who is Dr. Jonathan May. And Jonathan is the Vice Chair of the Psychiatric Trainees Committee, the PTC. So he's just going to talk for a few minutes about PTC, what it is and how it can help you and support you as a higher trainee. So Jonathan, over to you.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Can hear you okay and see you, yes.
Let me see if I can share this. Does that work?
That does work, yes. I'm not sure whether it's on slideshow mode at the moment, though. Do you want to try advancing to the next slide?
Oh, let me see if I...
That looks like a PDF version.
Ooh. It's not being easy. Preview. Sorry. Does that move?
Yeah, that does move, yeah. So yeah, that's okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Appreciate we're needing time anyway. Yes, my name is Jonathan. I'm the PC Vice Chair this year. And I guess part of this is just to talk about us as the representative body for you with the college when you are starting in ST4. Hopefully many of you probably are aware of the PTC from time in core training or otherwise. Essentially the college talks about content and processes of training. Now I think about the contents, kind of what is it to be a psychiatrist and how do we what we're thinking about in that. These, I don't think any of these would be particularly surprising to you. And then our process is kind of how do we make sure there's a reasonable training program, and how do we reflect that those curriculum achievements in terms of examinations, assessments. And I guess a big part of what I see the PTC's role as, which I'm not sure if everyone agrees with me, is to try to keep that as simple as possible in terms of not having these portfolios work for you. It's about your training experience in the workplace and keeping it as minimal as possible in terms of forcing additional forms to fill in, while still making sure that you're able to progress and it is evidenced. PTC itself has got 50 reps across the UK, and I would argue, although I'm probably quite biased, I think it is one of the most important committees in the college. We sit on pretty much all of the college committees, including the main ones. And it is this idea of us trying to represent all of you as trainees or as residents. That's still an ongoing debate, but it's to represent you and to try and ensure that there are standards, not just in terms of you're being held to a standard, but that your training experience is being held to a standard wherever you are in the country. And the reality is that it can seem from the outside that there are lots of people involved in this stuff, but when you actually get involved, whether it's through the union, through the college, there's relatively few people that do stand up, that do give that feedback. And so anything that you can do, whether it's becoming a PTC rep or honestly just speaking to PTC reps, giving your opinion, it really does make a big difference if we can keep those communication channels open. Just a few resources that through the college. You may have heard of Tron before, which is probably less relevant to you going into ST4 in terms of preparation for MRC Psych exams. I guess it does represent the sort of overarching idea of the college trying to provide some resources to cover the curriculum across the whole curriculum. And there are discussions ongoing as to what other resources might be of use in future. The trainees conference that happens every year, it's very well reviewed and we tend to get it hugely oversubscribed. One of the things that we've tried to do in recent years, which I thought was very smart, certainly wasn't my idea, was to specifically link to HLOs for each session that's run, so you can just slot that in and essentially say you've covered a lot of the curriculum by attending the conference, and say this one covers these HLOs, etc., etc. That's all pre-done for you. So you're very welcome if anyone is interested. There are early bird tickets currently available, I think, for the next week or so. I'll be there. Then I guess this is something that I know particularly nothing about, which is social media. I really am not involved in this, but it is something that's really important, and I do recognise that I need to try more. Both in terms of reaching out to recruit into psychiatry and ensure it's known as a career pathway for doctors, but also to raise awareness of the PTC to yourselves, and so that people know that they've got this representative body there to try and support them to raise issues in the college. Registrar's magazine that's run, huge amount of work that goes into that. If you're interested in what's going on, there's a resource. And this slide, I think, is just, to my mind, this reflects the fact that the PTC has a lot going on, and you do kind of need to dig in a little bit to figure it all out, which I'm still doing. But the main message is that it's your representative body on the college, and it's about that. I suppose it's more about that training, more about that deanery link or equivalent names in England and other nations. But whereas your union is more about sort of terms and conditions, employment contracts. So they are distinct but synergistic, and it's really good to engage. A few other key documents here. I see your Guide to Living and Working in the UK for international medical graduates. Certainly one of the main things the PTC does try to cover is thinking about the experience of IMG doctors as they start working in the NHS, and trying to provide whatever support we can with that. And this was one piece of work that was done last year in regard to study budgets from several of our reps, which is very relevant. Another one that's currently ongoing is the review into physician associates, which I think we're going to probably get some conclusions from pretty soon. And the PTC is involved in a lot of these sort of most contentious things that are going on each year, is my understanding. And so it is important that we know people's views. Psychiatric support services, psychiatrist support service, third time. Details there if you want to take a picture. It's certainly not a rare experience for people to need support as we go through training, and there are many others available. Practitioner health. I've heard only good things about the PSS service. Finally, so PTC, that's our email, contact us there, or on the webpage, you can find out who your PTC reps are in the area. If you just Google psychiatric trainees trainees committee reps. It'll come up with the college website with a list of everyone. Thank you. And if anyone sends any emails through to that with any questions, then they can be forwarded on to me as well if you're wanting to get in touch with me.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that summary there about the PTC and the important role that it plays. And I would just add, actually, that it was being a PTC rep that actually got me interested in college roles, actually. So hopefully, Jonathan, we'll see you involved in more college roles in the future as you progress through training and become a consultant. So and I'm really glad you mentioned about the psychiatrist support service as well. I think, we've still got a bit of work to do to publicise that to trainees, to make them aware of that service. Okay, so we've got about 13 minutes. I know there's been lots of questions coming in, and I know that Louise and Amelia are firing through as many of them as they can. But I'm going to ask all our speakers to come on screen, if that's okay, just for an opportunity for a Q&A session for the last sort of 12, 13 minutes. And this is an opportunity for members of the audience to ask any burning questions they want to ask that haven't been addressed or answered using the Q&A function. So over to the floor for any questions. So it might be an idea to either raise your hand or come on screen if you've got a question you'd like to ask one of our speakers.
Declan, sorry to interrupt there. Our delegates can't come on screen or speak, so we need to take them from the Q&A box.
Oh, apologies. Right. Okay, I didn't realise we had to take them from the Q&A box. Okay, so we'll take some questions from the Q&A box then in that case. So I'm going to just fire through some questions then, if that's okay, and hopefully our experts can help answer them. So we've got a question here from an anonymous attendee. I'm a specialty doctor in learning disability, seeing patients from 18 plus up to old age. I've never worked in an actual old age setting. Would like to check whether working in an old age memory service once a week over a year would be enough for certificate C, or should I look into getting a full-time job for at least 6 months? Does anyone want to answer that question? Do we know the answer to that question? Okay, we'll move on to the next question, maybe just to, in the interest of time. So for MRC Psych status, is it enough to have passed CASC, or do you need to pay to upgrade your membership status to say that you've got MRC Psych? Anyone?
My understanding is that you need to pay to upgrade your status. I think to use the letters, you have to be a paid member. Yeah,
that was my understanding, Laura. It was so long ago that I passed CASC, because it was 11 years ago now, but that was my understanding. The first thing you did when you got your CASC result was a letter from the college to say, please become a now fully paid member, and then you can use the nominals MRC Psych. So, yeah, I think you do have to actually upgrade your membership status and pay for membership with the college.
I think certainly with RCGP, I know this has been a bit of a contentious issue in the past. I've heard some GPs, but one of the things I think is if you put in a bracket what year you've completed the qualification, then you're not saying you're a current member, but you are saying that as a qualification you've achieved MRC Psych year.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. So I've got a question here from Mohammed Alam. So it just disappeared on me. I'm currently working full-time in adult community clinic as a specialty doctor with on-calls in old age and CAMS. Am I eligible for CASC if I've been working for the last 2 years, or will I have to work in hospital for that? I am an IMG. No, so you should be eligible for the CASC. The requirement is you've done at least 2 years of clinical practice, so you have to be at least CT3 to do the CASC within core training. So as long as you've got at least 2 years of clinical experience, that should include older adult experience and general adult experience, and it's typically 6 months older adult, 12 months general adult. Then you would then be eligible to sit the cask. It doesn't have to be hospital-based versus community. That's not a requirement. Is it compulsory to have Section 12 approval before starting higher training? Is that a necessary criterion? So, Laura, did you have to? I know a lot of the CT3s, they all do the Section 12 introduction course, don't they? The induction course, usually before they finish CT3.
I know, to be fair, I think I know people that have started without it, but obviously you sort of need it for your on-calls. So I think it limits your on-calls. And so people have got it pretty shortly after, but I'm certain I know people who didn't necessarily have it right at the beginning.
Yeah, so typically you wouldn't be put on the on-call rota, so that is going to impact on your emergency psychiatry experience. So I would suggest, looking at trying to get your Section 12 approval as a CT3 before you start higher training. Right, got a question about, is there any disadvantage with taking some time off between core training and higher training? Oh, that's a really interesting question. No, there's no disadvantage, and I'm aware that lots of trainees are now doing this after core training. They're deciding to take time out, not necessarily because they haven't got their exams or because they're still doing the psychotherapy cases, but because they just want to step off the training pathway. And that's absolutely fine. That will not disadvantage you in any way. It won't negatively impact on your subsequent application for higher training. And there's probably a good argument for considering that, particularly if you're feeling a little bit burnt out or your own sort of health has suffered as a result of core training. It is a real rat race, and I think it is. It's stressful, and as someone who comes out of training, you don't have to worry about doing on calls, weekends, nights, and that sort of thing. So it's absolutely not a disadvantage at all. And Laura, you probably know, and Jonathan, I don't know whether you're higher training, Jonathan, or core training, but I'm sure, Laura, you must know of at least one or two higher trainees that have taken some time out between core and higher training. Do you? Are you aware of any?
I know lots of people that have. I think I applied because I knew I wanted to do forensics. There's not many posts, so I thought I'd apply and see, but with a view that I might not necessarily, there might be no post or I might not get in. But I know lots of people made an active decision not to, and some haven't necessarily gone into higher training. Some have taken a bit of a time, and that's absolutely fine. I know people that have got it perfectly fine, having a little break.
And I would argue that you're a long-timer consultant as well. Your consultant career will be long and arduous, so don't feel there's a great rush to CCT and become a consultant. Will it be a disadvantage or not to not being in a job at the time of the interview application? I finished training in January and will be taking up a role after the interviews. I don't believe that's a disadvantage in any way, Louise, is it? No, Louise is shaking her head, so that's not a disadvantage at all.
Not from that point of view, no, not at all. And especially if you're still in a post till January, then the interviews are at the beginning of February, so you won't have been out of post long before the interviews. And the rest of the process is assessed at the closing date for applications, which you'll still be in post then as well. So no disadvantage.
Okay, thank you very much, Louise. So Jessica Nuttall asks, can we please be reminded about Certificate C? I'm on call, so missed that part of the talk when it was discussed. Can you just remind us about the Certificate C, Louise, please?
Yeah, sure. If Jessica's got any specific questions about it that I don't cover, if she just wants to pop the psychiatry team an email afterwards, and we can answer any very specific ones. But generally, Certificate C is for those candidates that haven't achieved core competencies in a UK training programme. The form's available, the link's in Oriel, and the form's available from our website. You just need to get it signed off by your consultant. The only Certificate C form that we can accept is the August 2023 version of the form, as that was updated then to map to the new curriculum with the Royal College. It's just a form for yourself and your consultant to go through and detail your evidence that you present to them with regards to achieving each of the HLOs. When you are completing the form, if you have got any specific queries, though, like I say, please don't hesitate to contact us and we can help with those at that stage.
Okay, lovely. I think a few people have asked about the cask. And is there any particular reason why trainees in the UK are not allowed to attempt the cask outside of the UK? This has implications for many trainees who were released from training because of not passing cask exams or had their training extended due to not passing the cask exams. So you are limited to up to 2 attempts per calendar year at the cask. So obviously we have the January diet, we have the September diets at the Institute of Sport in Sheffield. So the places at international diets are a fraction of the number available at UK diets So there were 48 places available in Singapore, more than 700 in Sheffield. And I can tell you that for the January diet, I think there's been about 750 delegates requesting to sit the cask in January. So, demand is very high. So the reason why UK candidates cannot sit overseas is to allow overseas candidates fair access, because there is huge variance in those numbers of places available in Singapore compared to the UK. You can, of course, contact the exams team at the college if you've got any queries about the CASC or any of the other MRC psych examinations. So hopefully Claire or Katrina will be able to put the website there in the chat box of how you can contact the college exams team if you want to discuss that any further. Okay, so someone's asked if we've sent the application, including self-assessment, but then later get the opportunity to do something that would have scored higher on the self-assessment, is there an opportunity to amend this when evidence is required? So it's not possible to amend your response in the application form after submission. Okay, so if your response to the self-assessment statement changes between the time of submission and the evidence upload window, please upload the evidence you do have, and the verifier will use your self-assessment score as a guide only and will confirm the correct score according to the evidence uploaded. Okay, lots of questions here. So someone's asked about what proof I should provide for my application if I've written a chapter in a book. Well, first and foremost, well done. That's pretty impressive. So there is information on the website, www.medical.hee.nhs.uk. If you go on there, there is information about that provides further guidance. So it may be you think about evidence that the paper was peer reviewed. So a screenshot from the journal website, or evidence of some sort of peer review process, or evidence of the publication being provided. So something like the photocopy of the title page, print out of a literature search, showing the reference, etc. Okay, I know there's lots and lots of questions. I think I know Louise and Amelia have been working furiously behind the scenes to answer as many questions as possible. And I think there's easily been about 50 questions. So they are continuing to answer questions. I'm just going to have a look and see, is there any single resource to know more about other deaneries apart from the area we are currently working in? So where would people best be going for that, Louise, in terms of finding out information about other deaneries?
So for information about other deaneries, unfortunately, there isn't a single resource, but each deanery has their own website, which has information about it. So you would just need to Google the region that you're interested in, and they have their own website. Unfortunately, there isn't one central one with all the information on, but each region does have a very similar setup on their website, which contains all the information that you would need to know. So if the specific regions that you're interested in, I would just Google I think they're all actually still old HEE websites for them. If you are struggling for any, though, you can drop us an email, because we do have contact information and website information for each of the regions. So you can always contact us. Okay, and I'm just very mindful of time. So one more question, if that's okay. So I've done 2 years of training in another specialty abroad. Is there a specific document we need to fill out or bring to certify this? So training abroad, Louise, how do we provide evidence of that? If it's with regards to answering the certificate C, then it would just be evidence that you would present to the consultant signing off the certificate C. If it's evidence, if you mean evidence that you've done your training abroad, that would be checked as part of your pre-employment check. So it's not something we check at the time of application. So we would check your employment history to check that you've got enough experience and that you meet the core competency criteria. But as part of your pre-employment checks, then the recruiting team would check the actual training that you've done. Okay, well, it's now 6 o'clock. So just to remind all the delegates that all of the answer questions will be published on the college website along with this recording. So this webinar has been recorded, so you'll be able to watch it back should you miss any of it at all. I want to say a huge thank you to our speakers this evening, Louise Birrell from the National Recruitment Team, Laura, one of our STs, and Jonathan as well from the PTC. And a huge thank you as well to the staff at the college for putting this webinar together, Claire and Katrina in particular.
If there is anything that you've missed, as I say, you can watch the recording, which will be available on the college website. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I hope you found the webinar informative and your questions have all been answered. And best of luck with your application for higher training. And I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you very much.